The deed said the town had been abandoned for 20 years, but the wash hanging on the line was still damp. I stood at the edge of what should have been ruins, watching smoke rise from a chimney that had no right to be lit. The papers were clear. Every soul had left Millfield Hollow in 1855 after the mine collapse, and yet someone had swept the porch steps. Someone had tended the little garden behind the schoolhouse. Someone had lit that stove. I'd come expecting silence, maybe ghosts if I was lucky. Instead, I found a town that felt like it had taken a breath just before I arrived. The wind picked up. A shutter banged loose against a house across the way. That's when I saw her. Through the window of the house at the end of the lane, behind a yellowed curtain, a pale face appeared. Just for a moment. Young. Female. But what froze me wasn't that she was there. It was her eyes. She wasn't surprised to see me. She was terrified. Not the kind of fear a person has when they spot a stranger. This was something deeper, like she'd just seen a ghost, like I was the ghost, and she was seeing another human being for the very first time. The curtain fell back in place, like nothing had happened. I stood still for what felt like a full minute, the papers in my hand heavier than iron. My Uncle Marcus had left this town to me. He was long gone, and so was everyone else, or so the story went. But that woman, that smoke, that damp laundry, they told a different tale, a living tale, one that someone didn't want written down. I stuffed the deed into my coat and started walking. The street was too quiet, not abandoned, just muted, like the whole place was holding its breath. The general store windows were unbroken. The church doors were shut tight but freshly painted. Even the rusted bell beside the schoolhouse had a rope still hanging from it. The only thing missing was people, except, apparently, for the girl in the window. I passed by a boot scraper with fresh mud on it. There hadn't been rain in 2 days. I paused, looking down. Small footprints, soft-edged, had pressed into the earth like they'd only just dried. A woman's size. I glanced back at the house where I'd seen her. The curtain hadn't moved again. What was this place? A dead town that refused to die? I kept walking, past the livery, the old telegraph post, the silent saloon. Everything looked like it had been kept just barely above decay, as if someone didn't want it noticed, but also couldn't bear to let it rot. The last building on the street was a church rectory, with a garden of withered herbs and one stubborn tomato vine. There was a watering can beside it, damp inside. That's when I heard it, the faintest creak of floorboards behind me. I turned fast. Nothing. But I felt it now, a presence. Not the kind that made you afraid, the kind that made you question everything you thought you knew. Someone was watching me. I didn't raise my voice, didn't call out. I just stood there and let the I took slow, deliberate steps along the gravel path that curved behind the church. It felt like trespassing, even though the deed in my coat said the whole damn town belonged to me. Somewhere behind those walls, someone had been boiling water. Someone had laundered linens, planted tomatoes, swept wooden steps clean of the dust that blanketed every road into Millfield Hollow. I rounded the back of the church and paused near the side of the house where I'd seen her face. The curtain stirred. "Hello?" I said gently, raising my hands, palms out. "I'm not here to cause trouble." Nothing moved. A slant of warm afternoon light touched the side of the house. I took a step closer, boots crunching over broken shale. The door creaked open. Not much, just a sliver. Enough for a shadow to shift behind it. "I saw you," I said. "You don't have to hide. I'm not—" A voice answered. Not English. It was light, melodic, but unlike anything I'd heard in all my years drifting from one county to the next. I couldn't place it. Something older than this town, maybe
even this country. Then came the rustle of quick movement. My heart jumped. I took another cautious step. And that's when the man stepped out from around the corner. He was tall, lean, gray hair pulled into a low tail beneath a slouch hat. One arm was braced against a crutch, the other held a rifle aimed straight at my chest. "That's close enough," he said. I stopped cold. "I'm not here to hurt anyone," I said, my voice steady. The man squinted. His face was lined deep, like a tree cut with years of wind and worry. His grip on the rifle didn't waver. "Who sent you?" "No one," I said. "I'm Levi Mallister. Marcus Mallister was my uncle." He flinched. Not visibly, not to someone who wasn't looking, but I saw it. "Marcus Mallister is dead," he said. "I know. You shouldn't be here." "Maybe not, but I am." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Behind the cracked door, I caught another movement. A young woman, peeking out just enough for one wide, light-filled eye to be visible. She looked so unsure it hurt to see. "I saw her," I said gently, nodding toward the door. "She's not a ghost, and neither are you." "She shouldn't have looked at you," the man muttered. "She's not ready." "Who is she?" "She's none of your concern." "She's my blood." That made him pause. I pulled the folded deed from my coat and tossed it on the porch between us. The wind caught the corner and flapped it open. I inherited this town. I didn't come to take it, I came to understand it. The man's eyes lingered on the paper, then rose back to mine. Slowly, achingly, he lowered the rifle. "Name's Ezekiel Thorne. She's called Iris." "Iris Mallister?" He looked down. "She's been called a lot of things. Ezekiel didn't invite me in, but he didn't tell me to leave either. That felt like progress." He turned to the door and rapped it gently with the back of his hand. "It's all right, girl. He won't harm."
The parlor hadn't changed in 60 years, maybe longer. I stepped inside cautiously, following Iris and Ezekiel through a narrow hallway lined with faded portraits and hand-stitched samplers. The air smelled of tea leaves, old cedar, and something faintly medicinal. The wallpaper peeled in places, but the floor was spotless. A low fire burned in the hearth, summer be damned, and above it hung a painting that stopped me cold. I stepped closer. "That's my uncle." Iris stood beside the hearth, hands folded politely in front of her, though her eyes never left the painting. "You recognize him?" she asked. I nodded slowly. "That's Marcus Mallister. He is, my uncle. My father's older brother." She tilted her head again, like that fact only half surprised her. "I never knew his name," she said. "You've never heard his name?" I wasn't told much. Her voice softened, like she'd repeated that sentence all her life. Only that he was kind, that he protected us. "Us?" "My mother and me," she said. "But she died when I was small." Ezekiel stood in the doorway with a steaming teapot in one hand. He didn't say a word, but his eyes watched every move I made. I took a seat on the edge of a chintz-upholstered chair. The cushion let out a soft sigh of dust. Iris sat across from me, back straight, her expression open but unreadable. "How long have you been here?" I asked. "All my life," she said simply. "And you've never left Millfield Hollow?" She shook her head. "Never met anyone besides Ezekiel?" Her eyes dropped to the tea in her cup. "There was a woman once, Miss Clarabelle. She brought sewing thread and paper. She stopped coming years ago." My mouth went dry. "You were raised in hiding." Ezekiel cleared his throat. "She was raised safe." I turned toward him. "From what?" Ezekiel's mouth pulled tight. but he said nothing. I looked back to Iris. "Do you know who painted that portrait?" She looked up at it, tilting her head. "I did." "You?" I blinked. "But you said you didn't know who he was." "I don't. I just painted what I remembered." "You remembered his face?" She nodded. "I used to dream of it. When I was little. Sometimes I still do." I leaned back, heart thudding with unease. "That man," I said carefully, "was my uncle, Marcus Mallister. He died last spring, and I inherited everything he owned, including this town. But he never once mentioned a daughter or a wife." Iris didn't flinch. She merely sipped her tea. "My mother's name was Elena. I only know that much." My heart dropped into my boots. I'd read that name before. Elena Harrow, Marcus's housekeeper, his discreet companion, according to family whispers, a woman of mixed blood, originally from the Mexican territories. My father had called her Trouble. My mother had said she disappeared. There was no funeral, no grave. "Your name, is it Iris Harrow?" She shook her head. "No, Ezekiel said it was safer if I didn't have one. He called me Iris because of my eyes." I swallowed hard. "You're Marcus's daughter." Ezekiel tensed.
The county clerk's office in Red Barrow was a 2-room building that smelled of dust, ink, and decades of stale tobacco. I signed the visitor's log and took a seat across from Mrs. Garvey, the sharp-eyed archivist with a steel bun and a memory like a ledger. "I'm looking for records," I told her, "from Millfield Hollow, before the mine collapse. Marriage, birth, anything tied to Marcus Mallister." She snorted. "That place? Ain't had a proper resident in 20 years. I think there were more than we were told." Mrs. Garvey squinted at me. "You kin to Marcus?" "Nephew." She pushed up her spectacles. "Then you'll want to look in the 1850s marriage logs, if there's anything to find." 2 hours passed, then 3. My fingers were blackened from old paper dust. I found Marcus's name several times. Mining contracts, land purchases, even a water rights dispute. But what made me stop cold was a worn envelope stuck between pages of the 1854 marriage ledger. I slid it free. Inside, tucked neatly, was a marriage certificate. Marcus Ellison Mallister, May 3rd, 1854. The signature was his. I knew his handwriting, that long, elegant curl on the capital M and the sharp S like a knife edge. Elena had signed too, in round, careful letters. I pressed my thumb to the seal. Notarized. Official. But there was more. Tucked behind the certificate was a birth record. Isabella Elena Mallister, born March 12th, 1855. My mouth dried up. Isabella, not Iris. I looked again at the delicate handwriting on the form. A midwife's signature. Location, Millfield Hollow. Mother's name, Elena Vasquez Mallister. Father, Marcus E. Mallister. I leaned back, heart thudding. So it was true. She was real. A daughter. My cousin. Why had Marcus ever said a word? Why had he let the world think the mine collapse had taken them both? I dug deeper. No death certificates, no funeral notices, no record of Elena or Isabella dying. Just a sharp, sudden absence. Like someone had wiped them from the ledger on purpose. I walked out of the courthouse with shaking hands, the photocopies folded neatly in my coat pocket. The truth was heavier than I'd expected. Not just because it changed what I knew about Marcus, but because it made everything else more dangerous. If Marcus had hidden a wife and child, there had to be a reason. And people don't bury the truth that deep unless someone's still out there willing to dig it up. I rode back to Millfield Hollow before sunset. The sky bled copper behind the hills as I passed the old riverbed and the collapsed mine entrance, its warning signs fading.
I spent the night in one of the upstairs rooms, what used to be the preacher's quarters back when Millfield Hollow had a congregation. The mattress was thin, but the silence was thicker. It pressed on my chest like memory, like guilt that wasn't mine but still felt heavy. I heard them talking downstairs just before dawn, Iris and Ezekiel. Their voices low, not angry yet, but strained, tense, like a thread was pulling tight. I came down the stairs slowly. Iris stood in the parlor, barefoot, the sunlight through the east window catching in her hair. She held the birth certificate in one hand, crumpled slightly at the edges now, and her eyes were red, not from tears, but from staying awake all night, chasing ghosts through her blood. Ezekiel stood near the hearth, rifle leaning against the wall, but he wasn't threatening, just tired, like a man who'd spent decades guarding a secret that finally stepped into daylight. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" she asked him. "I was protecting you. From what?" He didn't answer. I stepped into the room. "She deserves the truth," I said. "I gave her a life without fear," he replied, voice taut, "without hunger, without men like Samuel Dutton." That name. It hit the air like a gunshot. Iris turned to me. "Who is Dutton?" I looked at Ezekiel. "You haven't even told her that?" Ezekiel's jaw flexed. "You don't know what he did, what he was." I stepped forward. "Maybe not everything, but I know he was Marcus's business partner, and I know Marcus cut him out of the mine contract right before it collapsed." Iris's eyes flicked between us. "Start talking," she said. Ezekiel's hand moved toward the rifle. Not fast, but I saw it. "I wouldn't," I said calmly. He froze. "I don't want blood, but she's not a child. Not anymore." Iris stepped forward then, between us. She touched the barrel of the rifle and pushed it gently away from the wall. "No more silence. No more locked windows. I want to know." The man who had guarded her like a father looked at her like he'd never really seen her before. He sat. So did she. So did I. Ezekiel began to speak. "I met Marcus when I was 17. He gave me a job working claims along the ridge. Paid me fair. Treated me decent. That was rare." He looked at Iris. "Then your mother came, Elena. She was fire and spirit and too smart for the life she was given. Marcus fell for her the moment she stepped off the coach." Iris's hands trembled in her lap. "They married in secret," he went on. "Not everyone approved, especially not Dutton." "Why?" "Because Elena was part Oodem, and because she saw through him." Ezekiel looked down. "She knew the mine wasn't stable, told Marcus, told the others, but Dutton wanted the expansion." The riders slowed just before the hollow's main road, their dust clouds settling like judgment over the rooftops. Ezekiel watched them from the window, jaw clenched. Iris stood beside him, her fingers twitching at her sides, pale knuckles betraying nerves she didn't let show on her face. I recognized the man in front before he even dismounted. He had the kind of smile that didn't quite reach his eyes and a coat that hung too fine for honest labor. Samuel Dutton. His silver mustache was trimmed, his boots polished like he'd just stepped out of a courtroom. Behind him rode 5 men, all armed. Dutton's voice rang out clear across the porch. "Evening, Hollow folk.
I heard the town had a new owner. I stepped out the door before Ezekiel could stop me. The sun was hot on my back, and my boots sounded loud against the old wooden boards. I met Dutton at the edge of the steps. "You must be Levi Mallister," he said, holding out a hand as if this was a business call, not a threat wrapped in a grin. I didn't take it. "I know who you are." He laughed. "Well, most folks do. I'm the man who pulled the mine out of the mud before your uncle lost his mind and threw it all away." I didn't blink. "You mean the mine you sabotaged?" That wiped the grin right off his face. Behind me, the door creaked as Ezekiel stepped out, rifle in hand, but not raised. Dutton's men stiffened. "No need for all this tension," he said smoothly. "I came to make an offer." "You don't own anything here," I said. "Don't need to. I owe something. That makes it mine by rights." Ezekiel laughed once, a bitter, ragged sound. "You owe corpses, Dutton. That's all." Dutton's eyes slid past me to the window. Iris stood there, framed by lace curtains and morning light. He tipped his hat. "She's the reason I came." My stomach turned. "Her mother," he continued, "was a clever woman. Cost me a fortune. I figure I'm owed restitution. You touch her, and you'll die in the dirt you crawled in on." His eyes came back to mine. "That girl is nothing but a ghost with a heartbeat. I don't want her dead, Levi. I want her useful. She's leverage. She's Mallister blood. That mine could be opened again with the right signatures." Ezekiel raised the rifle a little higher. "Try it. Go ahead." But Dutton didn't flinch. "You think I'm stupid, old man? You think I came here without knowing the law's changed?" He pulled a folded piece of paper from his coat. "A judge signed off last week," he said, handing it to me. "If Iris signs over rights to the mineral claim, I walk away. If not, well..." I didn't look at the paper. I just tore it in half. Dutton blinked, then smiled again, wider this time, more teeth than charm. "You're gonna regret that, boy." I heard the front door open. Iris stepped out beside us. No fear on her face now, only something harder, like polished stone. "I'm not your tool," she said. Dutton looked her over slowly, like a man studying livestock. "You're your mother's daughter," he said. "She'd talked too much, too." Before I could speak, Ezekiel stepped forward.
By sundown, every door in Millfield Hollow was locked. Ezekiel had loaded what few rounds he had into 2 rifles and a pair of rusting revolvers. I took the scattergun from the church supply closet, checked its action, and loaded both barrels with buckshot. It felt sacrilegious using it under the pulpit, but the prayers we needed weren't written in any Bible. Iris moved like a ghost through the house, lighting lamps, tying back her hair, placing pots over windowsills like she'd done this before. Maybe not war, but siege. The calmness in her unnerved me more than Dutton's threats. "You're not afraid?" I asked as we checked the back door. "I've lived my whole life waiting for a truth to kill me," she said. "I'd rather it come loud than silent." Outside, the wind picked up, thick with coming rain. Ezekiel stood on the porch, the journal open in his hands. I wrote it down the night it happened. I'd been drinking, but not enough to forget. He lit the torch. He told me to keep quiet, said the money would make it worth it. "You were there?" "I was in the shaft above, saw it all. I thought he was bluffing, just trying to scare Marcus. Then the beams gave and the rocks came down." He looked at me. "I buried the journal in a biscuit tin behind the rectory, dug it up this morning." I opened the pages. The handwriting was shaky, desperate, but the facts were there. Dates, names, descriptions of Dutton's sabotage, the men left inside. I folded it shut and slipped it into my coat. I'll ride to Red Barrow if I have to. Swear every word of this. You won't have to ride anywhere. You'll be too busy staying alive. The first shot came at midnight. It hit the weather vane and sent it spinning like a warning bell. Ezekiel and I ducked behind the porch beam. I could just make out Dutton's men across the road, slipping between shadows. No horses this time. They'd come on foot, quiet as snakes. A bottle shattered against the side of the church. Firebomb, Ezekiel hissed. They'll burn us out. Iris didn't scream. She didn't flinch. She grabbed the old quilt bucket and ran for the well while bullets sparked against the fence. "Stay down!" I yelled. "They won't burn this place!" she snapped, swinging the bucket down the well. She doused the flames before they caught. Another shot rang out, then another. One punched through the doorframe inches from my head. I ducked, fired twice into the dark, heard a cry. One down. Ezekiel leaned around the beam and fired once. I saw a shape drop near the apothecary. Then silence. Too quiet. Until a voice called out, "Ezekiel!" It was Dutton. "Put the rifle down. You've got one leg and no chance." Ezekiel stood, slow, proud. "I got more than one leg. I got truth." Dutton stepped out into the open, revolver drawn. "You had your chance, old man. You chose the girl." Iris stepped out beside Ezekiel, holding something high in her hands. "You came for this? The claim deed? The name? You can have it." I took a step forward. "Iris!" She tossed the paper into the fire behind her. The flames licked it to ash. Dutton's eyes went wild. "You little—" He raised the gun. Ezekiel fired first. The shot hit Dutton square in the chest. He stumbled back, dropped his pistol, and crumpled. Spring came late to the ranch that year. The snow melted slow off the pines, trickled down the rock faces in silver ribbons, and fed the garden rows that Iris had carved with her own hands. She wore gloves now, real ones, and boots that didn't blister. Ezekiel built her a work table under the cottonwood. I added a bench from reclaimed barnwood. She grew sage, beans, squash, and something that smelled like lemon when the sun hit it. It had been 3 months since Dutton bled out on Millfield's dusty road. His men scattered, some ran, some were arrested when the sheriff from Red Barrows showed up 2 days too late and found the journal, the cratered bullet holes, and Iris, alive and defiant. No one questioned the story, maybe because it sounded like something from the Bible, maybe because the hollow had been dead too long to care anymore. But Iris cared, and so did I. She didn't go back. She didn't want to. We buried the last of her ghost in the garden behind my ranch house. Not Dutton, not Ezekiel, but the name Isabella, a name that had never felt hers. She carved a marker herself, Iris Harrow, born in silence, bloomed in truth. Ezekiel stayed on, cane in one hand, hammer in the other. He refused to sleep inside, said walls made him itch. Built a shack behind the barn and planted tomatoes in broken whiskey barrels. I caught him reading scripture sometimes, though whether it was penance or peace, I never asked. Iris took to life with hunger. She learned to ride. She learned to laugh, really laugh, with the kind of sound that made birds lift off the fences. She asked questions constantly. What's a telegram? Why do roosters crow before dawn? What happens if you kiss someone with your eyes open? She asked me that last one, and I answered by showing her. Some nights we sat by the fire, her head against my shoulder, both of us trying to name constellations we didn't know. She wasn't my cousin, not by law. Her birth had never been registered. Her parents' marriage had never been filed with the state. In the eyes of the government, she was no one. But to me, she was everything. One afternoon, she handed me a sketch, a drawing of the church back in Millfield, half covered in ivy. There were 3 figures in front, a man with a cane,
a woman with her hair tied back, and someone who looked a lot like me holding a shovel. She asked, "Future?" I said, "Maybe, but you don't owe anything to that place." She looked down at her hands. "I don't want to bury it. I want to grow something from it." So we started talking about plans, not just for her, but for others like her, the forgotten, the hidden, the ones left behind by men like Dutton. Millfield Hollow wouldn't stay hollow forever. She'd see to that. And me? I was no longer a drifter with a dead man's deed. I was a man with dirt under his nails and someone worth waking up for. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the scent of sage drifted across the porch, Iris sat beside me, her head against my chest. She said, "I used to think I was buried, like the town, like the mine, like Mama. And now?" She said, "Now I think I was just waiting for the right hands to dig me up."